look at the financing of those various scenarios. Then in a departure from our typical sequence, we will go directly to public comment, and that's because tonight is a night for actual board deliberation, not simply board discussion, but actual board deliberation. And so we want to make sure that our public who is here this evening has a chance to provide their comment in advance of that board deliberation as opposed to after that board deliberation. So that will be the activities this evening and the sequence of those activities. So in terms of our capital planning process, I'm going to be brief because I think we all know what this process has looked like. You all recognize this page from our website. We have had to date 5 meetings, beginning in early February on February 8th and culminating with meeting number 5, 3.5 months later on Monday, May 22nd. We had 2 meetings in March on March 6th and again in late March on Thursday, March 30th. We had an April meeting on Monday, April 24th, and then culminating with our most recent meeting on Monday, May 22nd. This process has been allowed to evolve. It's been allowed to build in both scope as well as depth. And I think it's been allowed to do so very appropriately. As we think about these 5 meetings to date, there have been over 14 hours of meeting time. It's been substantial. It's been quite significant. And those of you who have been observing this process or involved in this process, I think if we say nothing else about this process, it's been inclusive and it has been transparent. Every meeting has included public comment, just like tonight's will. Every meeting has been televised live on CRTV as well as live streamed through our district website, and all meeting documents have immediately been posted onto our district website as well as archived onto our district website. In addition, as Mr. Block said, last week we held 3 school forums at Wrightstown, Richboro, and Rolling Hills Elementary Schools. Those meetings in total accumulated nearly 5 hours of meeting time with primary emphasis on public comment because that was the nature of those forums. And likewise, those forums were live streamed via our district website. So in a nutshell, that has been our process to get us here to session number 6, at least formal session number 6 and overall session number 9. Now, in terms of scenarios under consideration, there have been a total of 8. There have not always been 8. We started with 3. But again, this process has built, it has evolved over time. One of the ways that has done so is in terms of scope. So we started with 3, now we have 8. 3 of these scenarios, as you have heard me say previously, in the position of the administration, we simply would not anticipate having the capacity to be able to execute these scenarios. Those 3 scenarios are now struck through on the screen before you. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. We presented these on May 22nd, presented these at the forums last week, presenting them again here this evening. So in our projections of classrooms available versus projected need on a classroom basis, we simply would not comfortably project to have the classrooms available that we would need for a straight closure of Wrightstown or for a straight closure of Rolling Hills, or the third option there is a closure of Rolling Hills with a 5-classroom addition to Wrightstown. So that leaves us up there with 5 options. And at this point, I believe we're all familiar with what those 5 options are, and we're also all familiar with this document, which is nothing more than a discussion starter and a thought starter for us, but it takes these 5 options and it places them horizontally across the top with various categories going vertically in the first column from top to bottom, from timing to financials to a variety of other categories, with favorable data being in green, unfavorable data in red, and yellow being somewhere in the middle. In the position of the administration, again, nothing new here. The three scenarios that we most strongly recommend for the board's consideration are the three scenarios that are in the middle. That would be the closure of Wrightstown with the 10 classroom addition to Hillcrest, or the closure of Wrightstown with the 7 classroom addition to Rolling Hills, or that would be the closure of Rolling Hills with a 10 classroom addition to Richboro and a 5 classroom addition and renovation to Wrightstown. We would favor those three options as opposed to status quo, which is on the far left, or a new build on the house tract, which is on the far right. Why, you ask? Again, the data that we have in the red would be considered unfavorable, and so it's those data cells that cause us concern. Now, the one data cell in red that I will point out to you is in the top right up here. You see the new build on the house tract. We have school year 21-22. I said this at the forums last week as well, that there is a pathway for that new build to be ready for the 2021 school year. So that time frame certainly could be potentially accelerated by one school year relative to what's up there on the slide. So I do want to restate that data point one more time. Nonetheless, we would center our recommendation administratively to the board on those three middle options. Largely for financial reasons, as you can see, some of those data points that are in red, but certainly not exclusively for financial reasons. And as we talk about financial reasons, a lot of it is not limited to just what you see up there on the slide, because these are the actual costs for the projects, but we certainly are not in a position to pay cash for these projects. We would need to finance these projects, and so that is our last formal presentation of this process. And so with that, we are going to segue, and it's my pleasure to introduce our Director of Business Administration, Mr. Bob Reinhardt, so we can take a look at those implications.
Good evening, and thank you for having me speak tonight. This is the last presentation we're going to have tonight. A lot of people are trying to understand. We talk about one-time costs, and we talk about ongoing costs. The one-time cost, we talk about 25 million, 35 million, and really, what is that going to cost us? So what I want to explain, I think the board is very much aware of this. They've heard me speak about this quite often. When we have a large capital project like we have today, or talking about today, we do not, that's not something that we budget for or we tax right away. We actually go out for a bond issue and decide how much money we need, and we finance the project through a bond issue. That money is in a separate account, and the expenditures are made through that account. How it affects our budget is when we have to pay the bond issue off and the debt service of that. So where I'm going to go tonight is explain to you how that translates into our debt service and for how long it goes out, and the actual cost within our general fund budget. It began with 3 charts. You'll see there's quite a few more charts than 3 now, but we worked with our public financial management, our financial advisor, Doug Taylor, and I put together some drawdown schedules, meaning when would the project start, when would it end, and how do we expect the money to flow, and how would it be expended. At that point, public financial management takes that information and says, well, we have this borrowing that we need to do, we have this borrowing to do, we need to do, so we're going to plan how we would borrow that money to make sure we have the sufficient funds throughout the project period. So that is what has been done with the information that we gave them and what you'll be seeing in charts today. Interest rates today, we're using today's interest rates. We might be a little conservative with them, but understand that this information can change greatly with a move of interest rates. We've enjoyed, since I've been here, the last 7 years with this historical low interest rates, and we've been able to do a lot of good things with that, with limited tax increases to our community. But as interest rates rise or go down, this information will change. And I'm sure the board remembers this Our general fund budget, if you look at our general fund budget, we have approximately $18 million of debt service. So as long as we keep our debt service at that level, we don't need to increase taxes. So what my job is to keep the debt service under this or at that so that we don't have to increase taxes or use fund balance. Currently, if you looked at what our debt was outstanding right now, this is our debt over time. And those are the annual payments that we would be making. And as you see, it drops off pretty quickly. And we have done that and prepared to do that because we knew that there was projects going on that will happen. We could have made it real tight and not had any room up here if we wanted to deal with that, because we know that our financing would be over, but we know that we need room out here. You're aware that our middle school projects are still moving forward, and we still need in the future to borrow another about $20 million. That number will change based on where we come up to the project at the end. But should we have to do, well, we have to raise the $20 million. This is the interest that adds on to our debt service. Again, it's not costing taxpayers anything because we're under our budget amount. Now, if you look up here, if we would close Wrightstown Elementary School or Hillcrest Elementary School, we would need to borrow $25 million. You will see over this period of time, about 6 years, we would be over by a little bit over our budget. If you add all those numbers up, it's about less than $300,000. So I would tell you, we have fund balance that's sufficient enough to cover that without a tax increase. Okay, so the $25 million bond issue looks that way. Everyone understand where I am with that? Okay, now I'm going to go a little quicker. I understand Monday night, a proposal came up to have a reduced scope in the additions to Wrightstown Elementary School. With work with Mr. Taylor, determined that we could do that project for $21 million. Well, if we borrow $21 million, you should see there's a little height there, but I'm sure we'd be able to cover that. And then we don't use fund balance at all. Again, I would tell you that we would be clear to do this bond issue and wouldn't have to be too concerned with raising taxes or affecting the taxpayer. Now, this is the $35 million bond issue, which would be if we built on the house track. As you see, we are above for quite a long period of time, and we would have to use that. That's about $2.1 million of fund balance. Again, it would be a board decision, but that is getting out further on what we want to use our fund balance for, but that would be something we could still discuss. And if anyone board member would ask me, could we afford that in today's world? I would say yes, we could do that. It's a one-time expenditure, and we could handle that. Look at all this here. Why do we have that, and why didn't we just push all our financing up front here? Because if you looked at our capital planning, this isn't the last of it. We have, I think, 5 more elementary schools that need renovations, and that's worth about $115 million. So if we would push this all back, we wouldn't have the availability to keep borrowing funds. So it's very important that we manage it this way, and we've been managing it that quite a bit. The board would tell you that I think we saved about $11 million in financing costs by refinancing our bonds, and instead of taking it the first year, we've been lapping off the bond, the costs there to keep preparing for this so it does not have a large impact on the taxpayers. So this is a different way of looking at it. A line across is our budget again, and as you will see, the yellow is the $35 million bond issue each year. The orange is the $25 million bond issue, and the $21 million is the blue. And you will see it makes sense that when you borrow more money, there's more money at the end of the bond issue that you have to pay off, and that is where a lot of the costs are. As you read up here, the notes say that $272,000 would be the orange, And then 2.1 million would be the yellow. If you look at this, between the 25 million and the 35 million, it would be $16.6 million more at the end of the time with your financing costs and all that to actually build on the house track than it would be for the $25 million projects. And it would actually be $23.3 million more than the reduced scope. So you can see the way that your costs actually increase over time. Another way to look at it is each line is drawn out on the debt service here for each year. And this is the cumulative cost. So I just keep accumulating the cost on this side so it's a secondary axis there. And this is the primary axis. And it just illustrates again the differences in the cost. I'm just reiterating what I said before and explained where the costs are. That's all I have for you tonight. Is there any questions by the board? This is very familiar to you guys. You see me with this same graph all the time as we were managing it.
Any questions?
No, it's great information. And go back a couple of graphs, the bar graphs where you showed that there. Did you prepare that or did PFM prepare that?
I prepared it.
That's really excellent work. Excellent work. Thank you. It's very clear. It's very understandable. So we have 4, if we choose the house tract option, we have 4 additional years, it looks like, of debt payments. I really appreciate the fact that you've calculated the true cost of these projects. That's something I've been talking about for some time, so I really appreciate that. But great work, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make 2 clarifications, and just because it's important and not to point out any issues. You said something about closing Hillcrest Elementary when you were talking, and obviously it's okay. And listen, all of us will misspeak here tonight, just because it's people are going to be paying attention to what we say. I want to make sure it's clear. And when we were talking about no cost to taxpayers as far as the debt service, I think what you meant to say was no additional cost to taxpayers.
Tax increase,
Right.
correct.
All right, very good. Thank you.
I'm an accountant, not a speaker.
Great.
Okay.
And a great account of that. For anybody we can see the legend at the bottom with the years on it, but I doubt that anybody back there can see it. So what I think is significant is where we are over the current level of debt service that's 2024, right? Or is that 2020? Yeah.
25, is it?
So it takes us out to
24, yeah.
Yeah, it takes us out to the year 2024, and the final year on this graph is the year 2039.
Yes.
So I think that's fairly significant. Thank you.
Yes. And understand, we need this room here because if we're going to continue to move in our projects, so Feinstein is definitely needing some renovations. Some other schools need some renovations that we need to maintain this.
That's a great point. If I can because this is my second comment, I apologize. But it's not as though we're eliminating debt in whatever that is on the end there, 2039, right? We're gonna fill more debt here with the projects we have to.
Yes.
That's what's proposed.
Yes.
So we have 5 years of above the line payments for debt service, right?
Yes.
Above your line of $18 million. And then we have 4 additional years if we choose to go with the house track. This is a 550 seat build, right? On house.
Yes.
So this is not looking at a potential 700 seat build, which would allow for the closure of a 3rd elementary school, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It is not. Yeah. That's significantly more. I think you'd see these lines up quite a bit more.
But what it doesn't show is the offset of savings of not having those 3 elementary schools online. We're just talking about how to finance it.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Grubb.
Well, people are pointing out the axes, let me also point out that the vertical axis, the y-axis, bottoms at 10 million. So can you give us a view of what else is in the 0 to 10 million? What else are we carrying? Ballpark. No, I'm not asking for exact figures. The nature of the thing, because this is at the end of that time in 39. This district doesn't have no debt. There's a base somewhere out there. It's still going on.
Yes, Jerry, it drops off very quickly, but I don't remember the numbers, and I'm afraid to give you anything which it is under, but it continues to drop off quickly.
I understand. I just want to be very clear that it's not to zero, and it's a little deceptive. It's not with any intent. This is really the area in which the change happens, but to give everyone the complete picture, there's
Mr. Gruff is saying that's 10 million there, it's not zero. So we could still have debt service here because it's between 10 million and zero still. And I don't think it's a lot because it drops off considerably, but yes, we could still have debt service there that's between the 10 and the zero.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Everybody good? Okay. Is that it? That's it from the administration. Thank you. Mr. Reinhardt, appreciate it. We'll move to public comment now. We're going to take public comment for 60 minutes. I was expecting a slightly fuller room tonight, but if you spoke at one of our 3 forums, I would ask that maybe you let folks who didn't get a chance to go first before you come up. I will cut you off at 3 minutes just to make sure that we're able to get everybody in. I think we're probably going to be able to, so I'll be a little bit lenient at first and not shut it down at this. As a reminder, this is live TV and being recorded. So if you wouldn't mind coming to the podium stating your name and your town, and I'll give you the high sign at 3.
3 minutes, really? My name is Jean Brenner. My husband Bill and I live in Holland, and we had 2 children, now adults, who attended Council Rock schools, including Wrightstown Elementary, Richboro Middle School, and Council Rock North, all of which schools provided excellent education for them. I have 1 granddaughter who has graduated from North and 1 who will graduate in June from Council Rock South. Also, let me say that I know communication is never perfect, and I admit I get some of my information from the local news, which I don't consider to be fake, but it's not always perfect. Until recently, it seemed like our school board was on its way down a path to close a school to save additional taxes for the community they serve. That sounded like a reasonable plan to me, and I was informed that the future looked as though enrollment was declining, but I haven't heard anything about that tonight. And then I think it was just 3 weeks ago, I read that some people felt in order to save money, you have to close some school, but spend money to add rooms to existing schools, or at one point I heard build a new school. I'm trying to understand this sense of spending money to save money as you add existing schools or build a new one. My understanding is that enrollment is dropping, but it may increase for a little while and then drop again. I don't know who decides which families will have more children and when, but that's someone else's job to prognosticate, I suppose. But in my opinion, if you can't close a school outright, then don't close a school. Closing a school that will necessitate the building of more school space seems physically irresponsible. Some years ago, I was a teacher in a neighboring school district, and the teachers had a long, stressful strike. The results impacted that school district long after the strike ended. And some years later, when I left teaching and became a realtor, I felt the ramification of that strike for years and years, as my clients told me they didn't want to live in that district where I once taught, which was disappointing, because of the conflict that they thought was still going on. People didn't know the real story, but they had made deliberate decisions not to move there. Also, as a realtor, I know the negative reputation some neighboring school districts have because of their high school taxes. Prospective buyers steer away from the high tax districts. Building another school or adding on to existing schools while closing others likely will affect our tax rates. I heard the numbers, but I wasn't a math teacher, but I think it will affect our reputation, and I can't believe that this is what most people want. And is that what you want for Council Rock School District? With a background in real estate, you have to listen to public comments about these plans. You know what adversely affects property turmoils? Creating turmoil in the community with redistricting plans that move thousands of students to new schools, spend millions of dollars on construction you don't need, and raising taxes to support bad decisions. It seems to me that it's important for you to make decisions that cause the least pain for the students and taxpayers. And I realize that I'm probably not going to be around in 2024, and I won't mind even if I pay taxes in the meantime. But other people do, and I care about them. So if you have options that are not disruptive and clearly less expensive, I hope you choose one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. You must have been a public speaking teacher. Thanks for that.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Barrier-Terrace, Wrightstown and Newtown. I had one comment and one question for some point. My first comment is, I can't tell you how much the community folks that I talked to appreciated all the hours that you spent last week listening to them. I had a lot of folks come up to me afterward. I had people email and call me. Really, they should have been calling you and letting you know. It's just very important that the community have that opportunity. So I thank you for pushing to make that happen in the hours. My question is about this one criteria on the sheet, which is the redistricting impact. So there's percentages there that reflect the percent of students redistricted in each scenario. And my request would be, I haven't seen for the new scenarios that have been introduced since May 22nd, the analysis behind that. We saw them originally, of course, from Sundance. And if that is indeed a factor, it would be nice to know how that data, how that number is, or what it's based upon. So that's just a request if those spreadsheets exist for the new scenarios. Is that question clear?
I think so. So have you seen what we posted online in terms of the 7 different conceptual redistricting scenarios? We posted them 2 weeks ago.
Do they
The
include these?
updated, the middle 3 options as well.
And are there tables that show?
There are, the graphic is there along with the tables.
Well, then I shall look and see.
I'm pretty sure what you're asking for is there. If not, please let me know.
Okay, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny Schottmiller, Newtown Borough. The Sundance redistricting scenarios are online, but not the projections, not the enrollment projections. That wasn't updated. That's not online. I think that's what she's talking about. But I appreciated the community meetings. I learned a lot watching them. I spent a lot of time driving around the south area of our district just to understand what that is like. And based on a comment someone made on Facebook, if you live, north of 332 in Richboro, you kind of have a couple options to get to Newtown Middle. You can kind of go the longer way around to Swamp and have fewer lights, or you can go direct and have more lights. And it's about the same going the north way as it is to get to Holland. Even though our high schools are really close together, our middle schools are not. But if you live right around Richboro Elementary, like right across the street, it's not the same story. You have to go twice as far to go to north as you do to go to south. And even worse, there's like this really nice sidewalk straight from Richboro Elementary to south that you might not want to walk that far, but you could if you had to because your parent couldn't get you. And if you had a bike or a skateboard, you can easily get home from south to Richboro Elementary. I can't imagine why the immediate surrounding area and therefore the actual school would be sent to north when it's that close to south. If you live further north, it makes more sense. Obviously, breaking up the community is hard, but I think that's going to happen at Wrightstown too, that there's going to be a lot of Wrightstown families that end up moving to other north schools. So that's a problem we all kind of have to face. I have this map, if someone could pass this out really quick, sorry. If you close Wrightstown, this is not about crossing the creek. We can cross the creek either way, we already do. If Richboro was in the northern part of Richboro, this wouldn't even be a problem. Close Wrightstown, send us there. that wouldn't be a problem. It's where it is and leaving a huge gap in the district and not having the schools evenly distributed and then making it so there is only one place you can draw that north-south border. Down the line, it's going to be a big problem. I was really touched by some of the comments about parity in the high schools. Even though South is the newer high school, if they don't feel like they're on par with amenities, I think we should fix that. I think that a lot of the South feels unfairly impacted, and I understand they're a larger part of our community. There's more people there. It's the largest township, and they have more schools, so they're going to be more impacted, but they may not know the impact to Wrightstown. They haven't had a gym or stage that's on par with other schools. They've, for the last several years, had to send their 5th and 6th graders to an existing school community, which is much different than if everyone had 4 transitions. They're the only school that's had 4 transitions. And so they have also been and will continue to be impacted through the redistricting. I think whatever you decide, you could alleviate from the comments. You could alleviate a lot of parent and student anxiety by deciding not to redistrict the middle and the high schools after Richboro Middle is closed. When Council Rock South was open, obviously you had to fill that school up, but when you unsplit Richboro Middle, you let some kids continue through, and if you fix the capacity on the north and south, it will flow through and fix itself. And I think that obviously parents need to hear that, and maybe sooner than later. Thanks.
Thank you.
Scott McBurney, Wrightstown. I know you've all heard from me quite a bit the last several months, and probably tired of hearing from me. So I'll spare most of what I would like to say. You've already heard it before. Tonight I just want to talk a couple things kind of logical. The first one, being a resident of Wrightstown, it's not easy to get to Richboro. It's quick and easy to get to the north part before you hit the lights. Once you hit the lights, it's a nightmare trying to get through there. And you people that live down there, they all know that. I attended the Richboro Elementary Forum last week, and that adjourned somewhere around the 8:30 mark. When I got in my car, I timed how long it took me to drive back to my house, which is approximately where that line falls in Wrightstown, where maybe people would go to Richboro and maybe not. I'm somewhere close to it. It took me nearly 17 minutes at 8:30 at night. That's in a car, driving up 232, and hopefully there's no police listening. I was not doing the speed limit. I was going north of the speed limit. So you can imagine when you get a bunch of kids on a bus that have to consistently stop and are not taking a direct route, and let's face it, buses don't go the speed limit. They're not supposed to. It's not as safe. The overall riding time for students at Wrightstown that would then be going to Richboro is going to dramatically increase that I don't feel is incorporated into this analysis. That being said, on the logic end of it, Richboro is pretty deep into the South territory. Like we said, it's right next to South. Why on earth would we take that elementary school, change it to a north, to close Wrightstown? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment?
Good evening. I'm Henry Kent Smith. While I don't live directly in the district, my grandchildren both go to Rolling Hills, and I was at the Rolling Hills meeting. I just want to reiterate an environmental issue that I raised that I still don't quite understand relative to the considerations that this board is making on the school closures. I am a New Jersey land use and environmental attorney, and I will tell you point blank that Wrightstown expansion would not be permitted under New Jersey's new septic regulations because of the increase in nitrate loading and the violation of TMDL standards that would be associated with groundwater. The way you would have to resolve that is to demonstrate that the groundwater could accommodate the additional septic flow. Now, if you can prove that, great. But if you can't prove that, you have to mitigate. And mitigation often involves nitrate removal systems that I work on for projects in New Jersey that can cost upwards to $1 million+ to address the removal of nitrate from the effluent before it goes into the leach field. So this is the kind of a situation where maybe under the present Pennsylvania regulations that you have in place today, everything's hunky-dory. And that there are no issues because those standards are not yet in place to accommodate the heightened groundwater remediation, groundwater quality standards that we have in New Jersey. But what I have found is New Jersey tends to be more out front, and then 5 or 10 years from now, Pennsylvania could be adopting regulations that may then require remedial activity for the effluent discharge before it reaches the leach field. As a capital planning consideration, I just think that utilizing an enhanced and increased septic field may not be the best environmental decision. And I know there are any number of factors that this board must consider in weighing and evaluating the decision on school closure. But I think a careful analysis of environmental impact to groundwater should be one that should be more to the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, sir, what was your name again?
Henry Kent Smith.
Mr. Smith, I just wanted to say thank you for those comments. I know that your comments were something that that resonated with me earlier and several of my peers, which caused us to ask questions of our facilities director, Doug Taylor. I think it'd probably be great if you could share some of your thoughts with him outside of the meeting.
Sure.
And there's a case that there's something that that he might.
I'll just give him my card.
He can make us aware of that we haven't already talked to him about that gives us information to think about. Thanks so much.
Brian Barber, Wrightstown, Pennsylvania, not Wrightstown, New Jersey. Just putting it out there. So I grew up in the district, and I went to Holland Junior High, and I was driving by there, and I found it kind of interesting that if we stood on the roof, depending on the time of the year, you probably could see, 3 elementary schools. So, I understand there's a concentration down there, and maybe because of all the students, but I think also there's a concentration of schools there that if maybe people aren't going to appreciate when I say this, if redistricting was an idea that was started in the beginning, can we utilize all the schools we have if we look at where the students are and look at the efficiency and try and find out, are we using our schools efficiently? Instead of closing the school, maybe something else would have happened. Who knows? I just find it very interesting, again, that you can walk 1 mile from Hillcrest to Rolling Hills and 2.8 to Holland Elementary. It's, maybe there's too many down there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Williams, and I'm a Rolling Hills parent with 2 kids in the school, one a first grader and one a fourth grader. I spoke in the past about the impact redistricting would have if Rolling Hills closes. Over 1,500 children, rather 29% of the children, would be affected in a ripple or a tidal wave effect. Some of these scenarios were presented very last minute, and even though there will be a redistricting committee, there will still be a huge redistribution of children and families for this to work. We are a very densely populated area with a diverse population, and 45% of the students are walkers, as you've heard. I understand operational cost savings are very important. I understand that cost savings per student are important. And I have not heard, but I might have missed it, what the savings are with Richboro Middle School closing and how that helps and affects the overall budget of things. Because there's going to be a cost saving for that when that closes. Both Rolling Hills and Wrightstown believe our communities are important, as you heard in the last 3 meetings. That was made abundantly clear. Originally, we were told we needed 20 classrooms, which we don't have. And now all of a sudden, it seems in these very fast scenarios that to close one or both, we need to build rooms and additions onto other buildings and move everyone around like chess pieces. I am hoping for the status quo to renovate both of us and keep peace in the community. It is quite clear to me that this is what many of our communities want. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Reinhardt, maybe you can just clarify since the question was asked, and I think it's an easy one. I believe our annual operational savings for the closure of Richboro is 1.7, 1.9, something like that. $1.7 million annual operating expenses.
Jane Magny, Wrightstown Township. We're not New Jersey. Pennsylvania DEP doesn't work like New Jersey does. We're not as highly populated. And despite the comment from the environmental lawyer, on-lot sewage systems are much more environmentally friendly than what public sewers are. As a matter of fact, the Pennsylvania DEP has now, in less populous communities, has encouraged on-lot systems. And the reason being is that they recharge our aquifers where our drinking water comes from. And here locally, that drinking water are from both public and private wells. The chances of the Pennsylvania DEP deciding that they're going to put all of these things in place for on-lot systems, I think is really very far-fetched. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Going once? Going twice? Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move on to board deliberation. For the public, undoubtedly and regrettably, there will likely be comments that are made by board members during the deliberations that members of the audience may disagree with. I would ask that the audience not interrupt or react audibly as board members share their thoughts. We've had very respectful sessions to date, and I anticipate it would continue to be that way. However, if the meeting does become disorderly, I'll suspend the discussion. I do not anticipate that. For the board, obviously, let's be respectful of each other. Let's focus on advocating for our own ideas versus attacking others. Let's try to speak once or one at a time as recognized. In terms of trying to find some consensus, once you have, or if you do at some point, have a final position, please make me aware specifically or state that just so I'm able to kind of keep track of where people are through the discussion. To start, I was...
We have some, and I was out of the room possibly. Could you explain that we had a number of board members who had other commitments?
Okay. Yep. So I'm going to start to run through the group the first in alphabetical order, just as a way to pick it out. If somebody wants to jump up, before, that's fine. But I figure that'd be the easiest way to go through things. I am first. Is there anybody who'd like to speak before me? Okay. My position is this, and I've stated it publicly in earlier meetings. And Ms. Schottmiller said it. This might be a different conversation if Richboro was further north. And unfortunately, the schools are just in the wrong spot. I believe we must have 4 schools in the existing north to appropriately balance the district. Unfortunately, I don't see status quo as an option. And while I would love to realistically consider a new building at Howes, it's too expensive a proposition and it creates too much redistricting complexity, in my opinion. Originally, I had asked the question of building a larger addition at Wrightstown, but because of the timing that would require, I jumped to Howes, and then understanding that timing with that cost just wasn't an option for me. So that leaves the option, which I'm currently advocating, which is to close Rolling Hills Elementary and put additions to Richboro Elementary and the additions and renovation at Wrightstown. Financially speaking, for me, it delivers almost $500,000 annual OPEX savings, significantly better than Howes and status quo and similar to closing of Wrightstown. It requires significantly less CapEx and debt service than the status quo in Howes. And if we choose not to do a gym, and I don't know how I feel about that yet with Wrightstown, it is $4 million less than the real close scenario of closing either one of the schools. Additionally, there's an opportunity for $1 to $2 million in sale proceeds or the opportunity to consolidate facilities like LSAC and 24 to deliver additional operating efficiencies and or sale proceeds. The financial upside of closing a school and not building on Howes Track or the status quo really helps to support the 3 major renovations that are still going to be required: Solfaing, Stone, Hillcrest, and ultimately Richboro. And we saw some of that debt service information tonight. From a balance perspective, it avoids the complete shift of Richboro Elementary to the north and provides much less of a busing impact that would have been created by the huge geographical hole that would be created by Wrightstown. I've spent a significant amount of time in the Richboro community this past weekend through graduation parties, and we heard a lot of feedback in some of the forums about the desire to be at North versus South High School, and I heard more, and that really impacted me. I do understand that from a balance perspective, there is a significant busing impact to walkers currently at Rolling Hills. Additionally, I would like to see us work on the repurposing of Richboro Middle School into some type of community/athletic center. I don't see the need for whole-scale investments in that building as is. I would rather see us, to a lot of the points that have been made, utilize that property to ensure that we've got a balanced offering across the north and the south. I'm not necessarily advocating that we go build a pool out there, but it would be nice for South to have a stadium. It would be great to provide facilities for both middle schools that they don't currently have, whether it's a track or tennis courts, and certainly the fields in both Rolling Hills and Richboro Middle mean a lot to the local communities and been something that comes up. So as I've had a chance to listen to public comment and review the data, that's currently where I stand. I think Ms. Brooks said, toss it over to you.
I'm going to need a little while.
Okay.
So I'm glad to finally have this opportunity to deliberate and engage in some careful consideration of the scenarios with all of my board members. I want to assure the public that I have put a lot of time and effort into analyzing all the available information. I've reviewed past meetings and pored over the data. I've met with many members of the community, both parents as well as taxpayers who have no students in our schools. I've read and responded to nearly every email I've received. I took pages and pages of notes during the 3 forums last week, which have really helped inform a lot of my thinking now. And with all of this, I've never lost sight of the impact these decisions have on students. Andy and Mr. Block gave a great synopsis of some of the broad strokes of what has brought us to today. I'm going to go a little bit more into some of the history a little deeper. We've been in this process for a long time, for all 4 years that I've been on the school board. So I have to admit that it's a little shocking to me now to sit here tonight and feel rushed and have still so many questions and concerns remaining. Up until our last Master Capital Planning meeting on May 22nd, I thought our process was generally a good one. We started with some very good big goals, and we slowly came closer and closer, thoughtfully and thoroughly narrowing things down. And we made decisions to help focus us and keep us continue moving forward. But on May 22nd, the administration made and recommended scenarios that turned this whole process around. Ideas that both the board and the administration agreed to remove from consideration were suddenly brought back to the table. The biggest change of direction involves costly construction projects to put additions onto buildings, which is part of all 3 of the administration's recommended scenarios. The discussions about building additions were first made in November 2015 and was not supported by the board. It was posed again to the board in July 2016, and once again, there was not board support. On February 8th, at the first meeting of our newly formed Master Capital Planning Committee, just 4 months ago, Dr. Fraser's introductory slide presentation reaffirmed the absence of support for additions. On slide 4 of his PowerPoint, it states that we reviewed school capacities, said no to universal full-day kindergarten, confirmed a K through 6, 7, 8, 9 through 12 grade configuration, planned to achieve better north-south balance, committed to redistricting students once, and confirmed there would be no additions on elementary buildings. We also agreed to timing. We have consistently said we were committed to implementation of the capital planning decisions in the 2018-19 school year. On slide 14 of the February 8th capital planning presentation, this commitment to the timeline is once again noted. The commitment to the timeline is also memorialized in the list of frequently asked questions on the Council Rock website, developed to provide answers to questions that have arisen during the capital planning process. Question 2 asks about the timing of our decisions. The administration's response reads, quote, the ultimate deadline of implementing the new capital plan by the start of the new school year in the fall of 2018 to coincide with the completion of the middle school projects is firm, end quote. In response to question 6, which asks a redistricting question, the response reads, quote, "We have aligned all master capital planning activities, the potential elementary school closures, closure of Richboro Middle School, K-12 redistricting to occur with the start of the 18-19 school year." Despite these repeated confirmations about the firmness of the 2018-19 deadline, the 3 new scenarios the administration is recommending all shift and extend the timeline for implementation. The only scenario that keeps to the 2018-19 timeline is status quo. In addition to the costly additions that were off the table and a shift in timeline that we thought was firm, the new scenarios the administration presented just 3 weeks ago contradict other ground rules we had set. We said we would not split schools, but all 3 of the administration's recommendations would split schools because of the need for a staggered redistricting. We worked to remove trailers, but it was stated that the construction projects could require bringing trailers back. We have said repeatedly that this process would work to capture efficiencies in our buildings, but that idea seems to have been abandoned. At the February 8th meeting, the presentation states, getting better efficiency may require utilizing mobile room dividers so small group instruction can take place in small rooms. Currently, we have many small group functions taking place in full-size classrooms. But the administration basically took dividing of classrooms off the table by providing 2 choices: $3,500 dividers, which Dr. Fraser says is not educationally suitable, or complete room renovation at a cost of $225,000 per room. In addition to these small rooms, we have been provided data that shows that many full-size classrooms across the district are empty for large portions of the day or on multiple full days each week. None of the recommended scenarios address that. So while we spent 3.5 years exhaustively considering, discussing, deliberating, and analyzing information, at the very end of this process, the board and the community was presented with entirely new scenarios. Now, to be clear, I am not at all suggesting that we should be rigid or inflexible in our thinking. Changing the rules must always be an option if a process is to be fair and reasonable. But it must be done thoughtfully. Changing the rules should be done when we see an opportunity to make things better, not worse. There must be sufficient time built into the process to properly consider, discuss, deliberate, and analyze any new information. What happened on May 22nd does not allow for that. And now we're being asked to fast-track new options, each one costing our taxpayers millions and millions of dollars. At the heart of capital planning is how we respond to declining enrollment. Had our enrollment not dropped by 1,600 students, we wouldn't even be talking about closing schools and redistricting. We have 2 independent demographer reports that project that Council Rock enrollment will continue to decline. Enrollment projections are critical to this process, not only because they help us conceptualize how many classrooms we'll need, but also because they help us conceptualize the redistricting impact. I recognize we're talking about school closings and that redistricting is our next chapter, but I want to address the concerns articulated by so many speakers last week that school closings and redistricting impacts are intimately intertwined. The number of families and children impacted, the grade levels involved, and the duration of the impact depend on what schools we close and when, what schools we expand and when. Impacting the fewest number of students should be our goal. I think the conceptual redistricting maps were the most confusing and difficult pieces of data for the public to understand. It was noted at the forums last week that a lot can change with these redistricting maps. The final plans will not end up looking like what they do now. As Dr. Fraser reminded everyone last week, a community redistricting committee with representatives from all 15 schools will form this fall to do that difficult work. I feel terrible that so many people stressed out over these conceptual plans. They cannot be disregarded for the big learning it provides. Specific numbers of one scenario versus another cannot be taken as fact, but the conclusion can be drawn that some scenarios will disrupt substantially larger numbers of students than others. The redistricting analysis needs to be better and more thought out. One of the last speakers at the Richboro Elementary Forum last week said her biggest concern is that we're asking the community to buy into these scenarios without all the information needed to understand them. I agree. There has been relatively little effort put toward redistricting analysis that is so critical to deciding about whether to close schools. The administration's claims about which middle and high school Richboro Elementary will attend might not be true. I don't see how any commitment can be guaranteed before the redistricting committee forms and their work with the demographer begins. So now I want to explain a little bit about the concerns and questions that I have on each of the scenarios that we are deliberating. I'm going to start with the scenario number 5, the building on the house tract. And I will simply say that spending $35 million is way too much money to commit right now when the enrollment projections do not support a scenario that adds 350 additional seats to the north. The conceptual redistricting plan that was provided with this scenario is clearly unlikely, since it moves every student that currently resides on all 4 legs of the perimeter of the South Campus to a new school. So I have no way of evaluating the redistricting impact it could have. However, I see the house tract as a viable long-term solution to have an efficient-sized school in the north with public sewer that would create parity with the rest of the district in terms of class size and cost per student if it turns out that the demographer's projections are wrong, or if sometime in the future the population grows. But just to repeat, that time is not now. In scenario number 4, which closes Rolling Hills and puts a 10-room addition on Richboro Elementary and a 5-room addition on Wrightstown, I have several concerns. In the May 22nd presentation of that scenario, the data shows that there would be none, 0 extra rooms in the north in the 2018-19 school year. We would be at capacity in the north with no wiggle room, no ability to pop a section, which Dr. Fraser has noted many times in the past should be an important consideration in our planning. In fact, on May 22nd, a slide showing the potential additional sections we might pop this coming September was used as an example to explain the hazard of filling every available space and having no flexibility. It's worth noting that there was a comment by the demographer in March that school districts are best served by having 1 available classroom per building. Actually, he first said 1 available classroom per grade per building, but obviously that's a little excessive. Why would we rush to close a school, displace children, and spend taxpayer money on expansion to end up crowded in the end? The data for this scenario also shows that there will be a total of 5 available classrooms in the South. To point out the complexity of committing to school closures and additions with redistricting analysis limited to just a few conceptual models, with no classroom flexibility in the north at all, what would that mean for the overall district? What unintended consequences could that lead to? With no flexibility or extra space in the north, at some point would we need to shift schools from the south to the north? I don't know the answer to that, but it is hasty to spend $6.8 million on an addition at Richboro Elementary and $5 million on an addition at Wrightstown that would lead to 0 flexibility, insufficient capacity in the north, while disrupting the most students compared to any other plan. In scenario 3, that closes Wrightstown with a 7-room addition on Rolling Hills, I find this option interesting because it creates the highest efficiencies other than the status quo and redistricts the fewest students overall. However, this too does not provide sufficient flexibility and space because it only provides 4 available classrooms and again, no ability to pop where we need it. Scenario 2 that closes Wrightstown with a 10-room addition on Hillcrest poses a similar lack of flexibility as the others. It's not quite as bad as the scenario that closes Rolling Hills because that scenario had 0 rooms in the north and this one provides 1. In all these scenarios that close buildings and by adding building additions, we would spend millions of dollars and position ourselves with the possibility of insufficient space and limited flexibility. In scenario 1, the status quo, there would be 9 available rooms in the district, evenly divided across both the north and the south elementary schools in the 18-19 school year. It's the only option that provides the flexibility of space that Dr. Fraser has consistently stated is important and the approach that the demographer recommended. If the demographer's projections are accurate, in 4 to 5 years, it appears that Council Rock might be able to close 1 or 2 schools without the need to spend millions of dollars on building additions or building a school on the house tract. On the other hand, if the enrollment projections are wrong and we see enrollment growth over that time, by not putting unnecessary additions on buildings now, This scenario allows us to retain flexibility to expand schools where we need them or build a new school on the house tract, whichever makes the most sense in response to the growth. So thank you for letting me share the many thoughts I have on all of these, and now I'm anxious to hear what the rest of you have to say.
Is it fair to say you're leaning towards status quo?
That would be fair to say.
Mr. Bialik?
Can somebody else follow that, please?
Yeah, right.
Wow. Great information, Denise, as always. Thank you. Denise lives in the, and you live in the world of data, and it's always helpful to get your input and feedback on things. So I didn't prepare a written statement. I'm just going to tell you what my concerns are, what my goals are, and what I would like to see evolve from this process. So I've said very clearly several times and from the very beginning of this process that I think it is being done backwards. So my desire was to, let's see a redistricting plan first, and then we decide which schools to close. So now we've gone through all of this work, many different scenarios. As Denise said, Ms. Brooks said, some new scenarios that really were a surprise at the end of May that include a whole lot of extra money. I initially asked for the cost to expand Wrightstown. I wanted to see what that looked like. I talked a lot about the house tract, not to lean one way or the other, but we want to know what these different scenarios cost. Where I find myself is right back in the beginning of my initial comments, and that is we need to know where these kids are going to sit before we decide which schools to close. Without knowing where the kids are going to sit, we're really shooting in the dark. I have concerns about the demographers' reports. Now, intellectually, I absolutely believe it. It's backed up by Decision Insight. So the Sundance report is, and it correlates very, very closely with Decision Insight. What my gut tells me, and the information I hear from the public, or have heard from the public, and I want to thank everyone for their thoughtful comments, all of their time that they put into it. The research has been tremendous and very, very helpful. So I thank everyone for that. And it just goes to show us all that we should engage our community more often. I've talked before about having a finance committee with community involvement and to help us with some of these issues we have, and we should engage our community more. So I went off track, but I'll say that all that information has been very, very helpful and has helped me form my opinions. Now, I do believe that Richboro Elementary School should stay in the south sending area. I think it is very, very difficult to include that school in the north sending area. And I do agree that removing Wrightstown Elementary or a school from Wrightstown Township is not in the best interest of our residents in the north of the district, and certainly not in the best interest of the children who are going to have extremely long bus rides. If we must close a school, and I'm not convinced that we have to close a school, and my other concern, I'll backtrack for a second, is, and I've said this from the beginning, my fear is that we're going to either close a school that we're going to need in the future, or, I don't know which was worse, build and spend $18 or $20 million and have classrooms that we don't need in the future. So if we're shifting children from the north to the south and we're eliminating a school in the north, I can't help but think that we're going to have to end up building a school in the future in the north. And that's where I really started directing towards house tract. Now, the only conceptual idea that works for me for house tract, and I said it with Mr. Reinhardt, is building a much larger school. Dr. Thorwart had said, what about a school that we start with 550 and expand to 700 seats or 750 seats? That may work too. But folks, we would have to be able to close 3 elementary schools and combine those kids into house tract. So to me, that would be Rolling Hills, Wrightstown, and Feinstone. And that's the only way that works to spend that money. As far as if I'm pigeonholed to one of the 3 options that the administration has presented as what are viable, And I don't think I am, but as I'm looking at them, it is much easier for me to get my head around moving kids with the closure of Rolling Hills Elementary with the multiple schools in the south than removing one elementary school in the north. And the discussion about the number of walkers is not lost on me. So we have to lean back on our personal experiences. I've said a lot that I grew up in Council Rock, went through all the schools, well, starting at this school when it was Chancellor Street School, Goodnoe, Newtown, and then the high school, Council Rock North. I walked the entire time, and there's some real benefit to that. And I hear grandparents walking their kids, parents walking their kids, and that's a really important issue. But as I think about replacing Wrightstown Elementary or replacing Rolling Hills Elementary, I believe that we can keep that situation intact more easily for the Rolling Hills community by expanding sidewalks along St. Leonard's Road to Hillcrest Elementary or another elementary school. Probably Hillcrest is the closest school and the easiest. So your walk may go from 10 minutes to 20 minutes or to 15 minutes. And I think that we get help from the Northampton Township to allow that. But I have to say that given my initial concerns, are we going to build classrooms we don't need, or are we going to close a school that we're going to have to reopen? For me, what I continue to fall back on, particularly after in the last week after hearing the comments, is status quo. Now, I want to talk about my version of status quo. Status quo is not keeping all elementary schools open and spending $29 to $32.1 million in renovation of those schools. Status quo to me is telling the community that we're going to keep these schools open for a finite period of time, at the most 5 years, and we're going to reevaluate this process as we move through those 5 years. So we asked Mr. Taylor what those costs would be, and my specific cost was, what costs must be, or my specific question was, what costs must be incurred to keep Rolling Hills Elementary School and Wrightstown Elementary School, to use Patty Sexton's phrase, warm, safe, and dry for our students and staff for a 5-year period. No extras and no want-tos, want-to-haves, right? So what do we have to spend to keep those schools warm, safe, and dry for our kids? The cost of Rolling Hills Elementary with a significant roof replacement, which I'm told is probably something that's going to have to be done anyway, is $2.6 million. Now, $2.1 million of that is the roof replacement. The cost of maintaining Wrightstown Elementary School over a 5-year period to keep it warm, safe, and dry for our children is $400,000. So I'm looking at a total of $2.6 to $3 million compared to $35 million on building a large super elementary school that we may or may not need, or spending $18 to $20 million on schools that where we're going to have to build and potentially close a school that we may need in the future, and building classrooms that we may not need, depending on what happens with the demographer's report. So when I look at these numbers, $3 million, $2.6 million to keep status quo for a period of time where we can evaluate that demographer's report. And if it turns out that we do need extra space in the north, folks, we do have the house tract and we can revisit that at the time. That makes the most sense to me. Now, people will say, and I've heard it from board members around this board, well, Mark, if we say we have a 5-year window and we're not going to address this again for 5 years, or we're going to watch it as we go in increments of 3 years, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever that case may be, we can't hold future boards to that. Well, that's absolutely true, folks, but a future board in a year from now could decide to stop construction at Newtown Middle School and Holland Middle School. The future boards can do whatever they want to do. We have to act with what information we have today and act responsibly today. This feels like the most responsible action, and since we're talking about redistricting, we have not redistricted in over or close to 17 years. And I think it is not reasonable to think that we can redistrict all in 1 year. I've used the analogy of holding hands and just crossing over and saying, yes, now we're done. Folks, this is going to be most effectively done in stages. So we know that there are some pain points in the district that have to be addressed right away. Hillcrest Elementary is very full. We have lots of room in Holland Elementary. We can easily draw a line and shift whatever number of kids we need to shift from Hillcrest Elementary to Holland. We can take care of the Goodnoe Island. We can take care of the hot spots in the district in phase 1, move on to phase 2, move on to phase 3, and maybe a phase 4. Now, that happens to work really, really well with the evaluation of, do we keep the elementary schools we have, or do we close one, build on another, or build on the house track? And that all seems to work together. Now, some board members might say, or some members of the public might say, well, status quo is not a decision. It's not doing nothing. It's not doing anything, and you're not doing what you should be doing. And I 100% disagree with that. Looking at all the options and deciding to work with the schools that we have, making a limited investment to keep the schools warm, safe, and dry, and evaluating as we move forward makes the most sense. It makes the most fiscal sense. It makes the most efficiency sense, and it makes the most just general prudence as we evaluate these options. I want to talk a bit about the high schools. There's about a 350 student difference between the high schools, and we talk a lot about parity. Now, I've said this several times, and it really doesn't get any traction, so maybe it's just a bad idea, but it feels like a good idea to me. So I'm going to talk about it again. But there's a lot of discussion about later start times at the high school level. Yes, and I've said, thank you. And I've said several times, well, maybe one way to close that gap is to, now, moving kids, closing the gap means moving high school kids from the south, Council Rock South to Council Rock North. Maybe one way to close that gap a little bit is to offer late start times for a limited population of students at Council Rock North. The concerns with a limited start time are transportation, coordination with extracurricular activities, coordination with other schools. Well, folks, if you have 100, maybe 200 kids, I don't know what that number would be, that want to opt in, that means they choose to move to the other school, and they take care of their transportation issues. They take care of their extracurricular issues. They own responsibility for these things with their parents. Folks, is there anyone out there that thinks ninth graders and above can't be responsible for some part of their lives and can't make these decisions on their own? So I'd like to see that as part of the redistricting option. And maybe that gives us a little bit of breathing room somewhere, especially when we're talking about how we're going to handle the high school kids. So my opinion is we pump the brakes a bit, folks. We take a look, we mindfully make this decision, not as we can't make a decision, so this is a failure. It absolutely is not a failure. We should step back, watch what happens, do what we have to do with the repairs, not renovations, and closely monitor it as we move forward. Keep the elementary schools we have, keep the populations we have fulfilled. Focus on redistricting, because that's where the real work needs to be done, and move forward. They're my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Bywick.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure. As long as he's willing to answer.
Absolutely not.
When you say tap the brakes, do you mean stop all renovations on all schools, or just the two we're talking about now?
Are you giving me an opportunity to stop the middle school projects? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, probably I am, but
I don't know what you're referring to, Mike.
Well,
What would you be referring
to? If we just pour what you said into Wrightstown and Rolling Hills, we still have 3 or 4 schools that need renovations. Would we just delay that for 3 or 4 years?
No, I think we continue. Yeah, I think we continue with the repairs and you know, I don't know about the term renovations, but there are repairs and maintenance that have to be done on a regular basis. What I'm saying is, let's avoid spending $18 to $20 million on space we may not need. We don't know if we're going to need that space. And if we need the space, the answer is the house tract. That's the answer. But I'm not convinced we need the space.
Yes, I don't want to speak for you, so don't let me, but I think nothing changes with our capital planning process. The book's still the book. We still make decisions based on what's what, right? So, okay.
But I'm sorry, but I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Status quo,
Yep.
my status quo is not this status quo that you see in this
Yep.
category here.
Dr. Foster, you're up.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
This is heavy going, isn't it? It's a lot to be said in a short period of time. And I too have some written statements, so hopefully you'll hang with me. I do want to say in what I've written, I don't know that I can do as good a job as Mrs. Brenner did. I thought she was an amazing, was it Brenner or Brennan?
Oh, no, I
Brenner.
thought you were saying Ms. Brooks.
No, Jean Brenner at the beginning. I think she summed up things really nicely. I really valued the forums that we had, and that the people who came up and spoke. There were some great perspectives there that were very helpful. So it was well worth the time on all sides. So thanks so much for everyone that attended. So I just want to say, after serving on the school board for about 5.5 years, representing Newtown Borough and Newtown, I'm going to be moving out of the district this month to Delaware County. So other than a vote, if we take a vote on Thursday, all I can really do is give my opinion of what's best for this community and district as I see it. The bottom line, to get straight to my perspective, is that based on the population projections, the district is better off waiting for at least 2 years prior to making a decision to close a school. Given the available population projections, school closures, expenditure of funds, and displacement of children is likely to leave us tight on space. At this point, each year that passes for the next few years is very likely to passively create space, allowing us to avoid new building that we may not need. Further, as a worst case scenario, and this follows up some of the prior comments, if the perspectives we have heard from the community that there is more residential building ongoing than we have acknowledged in our population projections, and there is a larger population of young children than we have captured in our models, as seen in enrollment waiting lists for preschools in the area, the space situation following a school closure and limited build-out will end in a shortage of space. So it's clear the best, most sensible course for tax dollars and children based on the population projections is to wait a couple of years and revisit. So that's my bottom line, but I did want to give some suggestions to the board and the community of areas to focus on, some secondary points of uncertainty in deciding right now that I feel are worth our attention. So the use of our classroom space for programming, in my opinion, remains ill understood and ill defined for space discussions. We should gather together and display the use of each classroom in the district with respect to each class period of the day, knowing explicitly how many children are in each room for each period of the day will be a tremendous aid in motivating discussions of how our educational programming uses space and whether there are opportunities to be creative and avoid the further capital expenditures of creating and maintaining educational spaces. The use, another point that I think needs further look, the use of classroom dividers for small group instruction was proposed and then many months later summarily dismissed by the administration without investigation and discussion by the board and community. We should understand whether the initial proposal of the use of dividers or the dismissal of the use of these dividers by the administration was generally meritorious or not, given the expense of borrowing money for classroom additions and renovations. We should be looking into using those spaces efficiently, whether we do additions or not. Another area of investigation, the addition of a school on the house track, along with adding classrooms to schools, had been repeatedly rejected by the school board over the prior years. These options have not been well studied following their sudden reappearance in May into the planning process. They need further discussion prior to commitment by the school board. Adding additional seats in the north makes no sense with the enrollment data and projections we have. So we really need to line those ideas up, given the projections we have. Then regarding Wrightstown and the wastewater, so the nature of the wastewater treatment facility at Wrightstown Elementary and the likelihood of its failing to meet the direction of change in environmental standards has not been discussed by the school board yet. It's just been recently raised. So at public comment, this evolution in regulatory practice of the use of septic systems for large facilities in New Jersey was referenced, but Wrightstown has unique components beyond being a traditional septic system, such as the use of a spray field and wastewater lagoon. And frankly, I personally have no idea whether these features strengthen or weaken the case for the longevity of Wrightstown Elementary with respect to the expected direction of change in regulatory practice. So, I mean, we really do need to hear from professionals in this area, such as environmental attorneys, to help us understand where we're at with the future implications for this system. A few more points. So we had a statement from the administration that no special education programs will be moved as part of redistricting. At the February 8th Master Capital Planning meeting, Dr. Fraser had a slide that said we will capture additional elementary space by increasing school sizes within a reasonable limit to capitalize upon economy of scale. Doing so may require moving district special education programs to other schools. So from February 8th to May 22nd, at some time it shifted to become no special education programs will be moved. And frankly, a pledge to not move special education programs runs counter to the reality that the district has moved special education programming from time to time over the years and almost certainly will do so again. So redistricting, in my opinion, with a blanket exclusion for special education of unknown duration creates a significant constraint for redistricting. So I would need to know, is the administration's moratorium on moving special education unbounded in time or finite? And when will it be okay again to consider that there is a potential mobility in some of our educational programming locations? So one last item. Though the use of conceptual redistricting models is helpful to decision-making, our effort, in my opinion, was under-resourced. The board should significantly increase the level of investment in the demographer's modeling and have some extended work sessions between the board, community, and the demographer. Absent that, it is impossible to give a realistic accounting to the community of what the impact of a specific school closure is likely to be. Currently, the models provide at most extremely rough guidance that may be highly misleading to some communities, specifically that of Richboro Elementary. This is easily corrected with an investment for a more comprehensive effort by the demographer and more comprehensive discussion by the school board and community. So, you know, I guess I'm saying thanks and best of luck. And in summary, my vote, if we have one on Thursday, based principally on the demographic data and also some important under-investigated areas of potential concern, is to maintain our full set of 10 elementary schools for at least the next 2 years. In my opinion, it is likely that the population trends supportive of closures will be much clearer than they currently are a couple of years out into the future. Though I have not been a fan of status quo and have been a strong advocate of closing schools, the only thing worse than status quo is rushing to close a school and add on to schools based on data and perspectives that are currently underdeveloped. So that's my opinion on the matter. So thanks for listening.
Thanks, Dr. Foster. Mr. Grubb. In a departure from my normal mode of operation, I'm actually listening. I have spoken to, I think, 7 of the board members for the past few weeks to hear opinions. 2 of the board members who spoke tonight, I did not have an opportunity to speak to. So I'm interested to hear that. And candidly, I don't have a hard and fast resolution to mind. So I have some observations, but I prefer that I know people who spend time writing written comments. They're beneficial to me to hear. And that's the part of deliberation I wanted to give, was to listen. I think I try to be fair with everybody in saying that. Anybody I've spoken to is different. It's a different side of me, guys. I'm trying to hear what's going on and understand what the different things are. I won't let the evening pass without making comment. But
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm sure
that'll come back to us on Thursday. Thank you, Mr. Grubb. Ms. McKessie, obviously not here this evening. That'll move us to Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Black. As I said in the last public forum, although these are difficult circumstances, I'm really pleased to see so many members of the community and parents here, and we appreciate your presence and all the input that you've given us and all the many emails and phone calls and so forth. And I guarantee you that the vast majority of it was read and listened to, and you know, we took it to heart. What's really impressed me as a fairly new board member is all the effort and the hours that people have put into this process. I mean, it's hard to measure beyond the public forums, all the many conversations. And as an example, the issue raised about the Wrightstown septic system. That's a serious concern. And we listened last week when the attorney from New Jersey raised that concern, and it actually had been in the back of my mind. My dad actually built sewer and water systems, and I thought, you know, that's something to think about, because we all know about perk tests and how that affects the way systems work and so forth. So I called Mr. Taylor and found out that Mr. Block had also called Mr. Taylor with the same question, and each of us individually spent some time talking to Mr. Taylor about how well the system works at Wrightstown. Is it the way I put it? It's a layman's way of putting it. Is the system operating on the edge? Is it, you know, at capacity? If we put 5 more classrooms at Wrightstown, would that be an issue? And Mr. Taylor explained why it wouldn't be an issue. That previously with 5 modular units, the system was designed at that capacity. That he has a consulting hydrologist that he works with on a regular basis who's assessed the system. And we had a long conversation, and I can't relate it perfectly now because I'm a layman, but Mr. Taylor put my concerns to rest, and Mr. Block did the same thing. Those kinds of conversations have been happening over the months as we've gone through this process, because a lot of, I mean, you've seen how detailed this information is. It's difficult to decipher. So a lot of us spend time on the phone talking to each other. A couple of us will meet from time to time to say, do you understand? Can you explain? Help me understand. For somebody like me, it's a good idea to understand a little bit of history. Not to be driven by the history, but to understand it better. So I just want you to understand that we put an amazing amount of time, and I think it's to the credit of everybody on the board that everybody's made this effort. And I was talking to one of my nieces, who's a very smart individual. She's a physician. And I was asking her for advice on the way I take vitamins and medicine and so forth. And she smiled at me and sort of chuckled and said, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I mean, we have a lot of data here that is probably not perfect data. It's probably not all the data that we should have, but it's the data that we have. And we made a good faith effort to gather it. We hired the best person that we knew of to hire to do the work. It's been refined. I know that Dr. Fraser has spent considerable time working with the demographer to refine the data. It may not be perfect. No, it's quite likely not perfect, but it's the data that we have. We've been working on this process for many years, and people have made a good faith effort to get to where we are. I understand that we're going to be making some difficult decisions that are going to impact people, some in ways that really are going to be a challenge, and families are going to be affected, and students are going to be affected, and parents and teachers are going to be affected, and we understand that. It's been an eye-opener to listen to everyone's comments at the public hearings. I sort of expected it, but it was still even more impactful than I expected. Having said all that, there's one more point. I will differ with a number of members of this board on certain aspects of this master capital planning process and where we're going to end up and what decisions we make. But I genuinely believe that everybody really does have the best interests of the school district at heart. And I'm talking about the school district writ large, not individual school communities, because while we have to be concerned about the impact on individual school communities, in the end, it's what we do for the benefit of the entire school district, the way we spend the district's money, that is going to have the greatest benefit on our students. Having said all that, I believe strongly that our status quo is not acceptable. It's very tempting to maintain the status quo with maybe a little patching around the edges and some new paint, but I believe that would be absolutely unfair to the good folks in the Rolling Hills Elementary community and the good folks in the Wrightstown Elementary community. I think it would be heartless to just fail to make a decisive decision that lets the people in those communities know the future of their schools. I believe that both Rolling Hills Elementary and Wrightstown Elementary are far below par in terms of their physical facilities, and in the case of Wrightstown, programs. Not having 5th and 6th grade, I think, is not sustainable. It's just not right. So we need to make decisions on those two schools. I think additionally, not making hard decisions at this point would create financial pressures, would continue some financial pressures on this district that are also not sustainable. And I think the imbalances in our student populations are harmful, and we need to address them. Redistricting is going to be a great challenge. And to Dr. Foster's point, we may need new data, additional data. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of analysis. But as was made clear repeatedly, what we have just nearly completed is not redistricting. There's a good argument that redistricting could precede master capital planning, but we chose to do it this way. And next step, now that we will know the footprint of our buildings, is redistricting. And it's going to be a difficult process and a long process, and it'll be done publicly with public involvement. Building a new school on House Tract always seemed to me worth investigating. We already had that big unused parcel. And to me, I love the idea of building a new school that was custom designed for our educational programs, energy efficient and low maintenance. But unfortunately, I think the challenges of paying for the building, as Mr. Reinhardt detailed on the screen earlier, and the issues around timing make it seem insurmountable. I could be persuaded otherwise in the next couple of days, but I'm really not sure that the House Tract option is feasible. When I joined the board a year and a half ago, I thought the obvious choice was closing Wrightstown Elementary School because it's the smallest school, and by nature, and no fault of its own, it's inefficient simply because of its size. And the fact that it lacked 5th and 6th grade, I thought, well, it's halfway there. We might as well just close it. What I failed to consider was that closing Wrightstown would leave a huge portion of the district and an entire township without a school building. I also failed to really understand the imbalances among our schools and the need for really comprehensive redistricting. And that's something that I pretty quickly realized, that the redistricting has to be comprehensive, just like our look at master capital planning. There's some good reasons why redistricting hadn't been done for 17 years, but now is the time. And to do it properly, we need to have Wrightstown Elementary School. That's why I favor renovating it, adding 5 classrooms there, and restoring the 5th and 6th grades. I've concluded that the most responsible scenario, both financially and educationally, entails closing Rolling Hills Elementary, and of course that means adding the 10 classrooms at Richboro Elementary. I think it's regrettable to close any school. What I heard at the last 3 public forums, and along with a heartfelt request that we not close a school, is considerable anxiety and many questions about redistricting. Please understand that we see redistricting as a great challenge, and it's something we're going to take very seriously. We're going to listen to the community. We've talked about issues like grandfathering. We've talked about issues like splitting schools. We understand how people in the South are concerned about redistricting to the north. We heard very clearly last week, and I said this to more than one person, I thought last week's public forums were terrifically valuable, not just for the master capital planning process, but for the redistricting that's going to follow. So I assure you that we listened carefully, and I think we're going to do everything we can to do the redistricting the right way, and I'm certainly going to do everything that I can.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Ms. Thomas, that puts you next, but given you came in a little late, I'm going to assume you want me to move by you? Or do you have?
I will make some very brief comments, and I missed the memo that said we were coming with some kind of grandiose statement, so my apologies. I missed that memo. Anyway, people are here, they want to know what we're thinking, where we stand. There was some information that came out today, and I presume there was information given before, and I just have to say right now, I leave my house at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I cannot read my email during the day. So laid out there, I still have things to look at and read. I came into the process this time around, having been on the board for 7 or 8 years, thinking that house was going to be a good and right solution. And frankly, where I am today, not to belabor things that I think most of you have heard, is at $35 million on our most expensive option. It doesn't seem like the right option. I will say, and I'm sorry if somebody else said this, but I did think it was going to be a closed three elementary school on house, and I think that does alter numbers, but that's not the choice we were given. So at $35 million, I don't think that's viable. I think Wrightstown community and what Wrightstown means to them was very insightful and very impactful. And I don't believe anybody on the board, but I'll certainly speak for myself. Nobody wants to make that decision for all of the emotional reasons that were given to us. Likewise, Rolling Hills and the shoes with all the walkers and all the things we heard about Rolling Hills. I have several personal attachments to Rolling Hills. Nobody wants to close it for those reasons. When I had to, over the weekend, start to net that out, I began to think this is going to be a much more financial-based decision for me, because I don't know how you pit walkers versus a school in a township. And I'm not going to do that. So it really came down to looking at numbers. The one other thing I will say that came clear for me from last week that I will give my word today that I have decided I don't believe I will support. I think all of us have to keep an open mind till we vote, but I'm not in favor of sending Richboro Elementary to the north. And all the anxiety that I heard and saw, probably 50% of the people I heard from last week, that was at least part, if not the primary issue. I will not support changing high school students in the middle of their high school year. If you start there in 9th grade, Wendy Thomas supports you finishing there in 12th. I'd love to be able to say that if you have an older brother and sister, that would work. That's not economically feasible for a public school to do. And I can't tell you that I'll support that. But those two things, I mean, I had people thinking that their 9th grader will go somewhere in 9th grade, figures hers or her way out, and then change for 10th grade. I won't vote for that. I'm on record for that. I don't believe the board will, but everybody else can speak for themselves. The status quo option for me, and I know that speakers spoke about this last week, and what I didn't hear from them, for me, although I think Mr. Bilake, there's new information about keeping them warm, safe, and dry, I think you said, versus actual renovation, because those are the numbers. Seemingly, up before today anyway, the alternative was, if you keep them open, you have to renovate them. We have not kept those buildings up. And so that cost us $30 million. So, or 29.9 to 32.1. So you can't say status quo doesn't cost anything. And I heard some of that, and I have some emails that I haven't been able to answer yet that said that. So for me, when I look at it, status quo means that. Now, there's some alternative information that I'm going to look at. We're not deciding tonight. We're just sharing thoughts. So that's kind of where I am. The only other thing is it'd be very, very difficult for me to vote to put the $18 million renovation on the renovation line into Wrightstown, because the community sat there at the community forum and said, you don't need to get to the $4 million gym. So as one board member, I'm never voting to spend money on a community that they actively said they do not want. So for me, that number I'm looking at is the 14.1, 6.8. That makes that a $20 million option. Closing Wrightstown to me looks like a 24.8, $25 million option. Status Quo is 32 million and Wrights is 35. So that's where I am right now. And I think there was a presentation earlier tonight, which I also haven't seen, but I will also watch. So my apologies. I'm sorry.
Just added debt service.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. We're going to go to Dr. Thorward.
Sure, send me last. And
We're going to keep going.
No, it's fine. Let me just reiterate what Mrs. Thomas just said. I'm not moving a kid. I can't vote to move a kid that starts in a school to another school. So I'm a 100%.
At high school, you mean?
Or middle school.
Okay.
I'll struggle with that. It doesn't mean you'll have to prove to me it'll fit, but I'll struggle with that. And to put it in perspective, I've got one in each. So I know where you're coming from that, and I'm not going to do it if I can avoid it. Middle school is a little harder. We are going to have Richboro Middle School, and we may choke on that. I recognize that, but I would like to try mightily to avoid that. So let's start there. In terms of the closing schools or not closing schools, I have to tell you, it came to me after and I waited to really come to a conclusion or at least start coming to a conclusion until I heard from the public last week. Almost all of these options require building classrooms in order to close classrooms. And I wrestle with that. I really do. It tells me that we can't just close the school from attrition. It just tells me that. I don't think building on the house track is a bad idea. It solves a lot of long-term problems with where kids go. It's a long-term solution. I recognize that. I'm not convinced it would cost $35 million because I think we could do another lead thing and knock some costs off. We could probably sell some property and unload some things and bring that cost down. You're not going to get me to sell property unless I've got a big school to put kids in later. So we have some relief. Status quo, I know some board members have spoken, it just seems disingenuous after this many years of putting people through it to say, well, yeah, after all this, we're not going to do anything. But frankly, none of these options to me are really good. We can save some schools and then we send Richboro Elementary to North. We can spend a lot of money and build a house track, but we're dragging it out for 3, 4, 5 years. Status quo, and this is the reason I asked Mr. Violet, is I don't think there's anything such thing as a status quo. If we're not going to close one of these schools, then we better get renovating on some other stuff. For the public, because I've read every email that comes in, just a couple of facts. Council Rock North is bigger than Council Rock South, a lot bigger. A lot. It also has the stadium, the turf field, and the swimming pool. We need to get more kids there. So that's one of the problems that we as a board face. The 2 new middle schools are going to be about the same size. So that adds another conundrum to how we're going to get people to go where they're going to go. In terms of redistricting, I always considered it to be an elementary school thing. You put the kids in an elementary school and they flow where they need to flow. And we're not going to change them moving forward. You just heard me say that. So again, I'd like another round here. I don't care for any of these options. I know at some point I'm going to pick one, and I will pick one. I still like house. I don't know that we've had time to really flesh it out. And I know passports have said no. And so there are probably reasons outside of the costs. However, I think I can get them down. Or we could find ways to fund it without bond issues. So, so those are my comments. I mean, I came in last, so next time I'll go first. So that I can talk more. So, thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Dr. Thorpe. Mr. Grubb.
You know, it is interesting, different experience to listen a lot and then try and form your ideas. So let me walk through some points that come up as people talk. Regarding house tract, this board, in the time that I have sat on this board, has not had an opportunity to consider putting a building on a house tract. It was bound by litigation and challenge until June 7th of 2007, when Wrightstown acquiesced because of the desire of the community to have the veteran cemetery and permitted this district to have 2 buildings on that property if we wanted to. That allowed us to release the Melsky property. Mr. Tate spoke about the deficit in a status quo, which I know you love Greek mythology, which is just really, it's Damocles' sword. There's a great speech. Damocles' sword continues to dangle over the 2 communities of Rolling Hills and Wrightstown, and I don't think it's fair to live under that. Regarding moving special education, it was a question. I am not the expert on this aspect of it, but there is an aspect of pendency, even in the placement of a special education classroom and facility program, that you cannot move those at will, and the State Department of Public Education, the Pennsylvania Department of Education, looks at that and inspects it, because they don't want you, they don't, and I fully subscribe to this notion as well, they don't want special education children to be viewed as throwaway and disposable and pawns to be played. So that is why one of the reasons that the district and most districts are a little circumspect around moving special education. They don't want to light that up. It's not to say you can't, but you have to be sensitive to that. I always thought warm, safe, and dry was Maslow. I'll correct that is Patty Sexton. But I don't think she was here in 43 when Maslow did his things. You know, I too walked to school, and I walked long distances to school. And there is something good about it. But it is a tragedy of our community that our host communities and some of our host communities have made a decision to accept the money that would go into building sidewalks to build to support their general fund, and that creates a deficit within our community. Specifically, I know within my community, you can't walk there. You know, we see this as well when we talk about some of the construction that we're asked to make around the reconstruction of Holland Middle School. We were asked to fix a crosswalk on Buck Road, which is very fascinating because there's nowhere to get to that crosswalk on Buck Road by sidewalk. So I like the idea, and I think Mr. Bialik is correct, that the walkers, something along Old Jordan Road would be great. You know, in the community I came from in New Jersey, there seems to be, you know, doing things that then we copy here in our state. So in New Jersey, the town I lived in had a white border down the side of the road, which was the sidewalk. It was off on the pavement. Not safe. I don't know that it's any less safe, because that 4-inch curve of the sidewalk, sadly, is not a great defense. But I'd be absolutely thrilled if we go to something which has the ability to facilitate more walkers when we redistrict, that we do that. Let me come back to that. I do want the public to know, just keeping count, I lost my count for the evening. We had 88 people come to our forum to speak. We had maybe more came to speak, but 88 speakers came to our forum. I have to tell you, as a community, very much this could have been, do it to them because we want to be this way, or do it to them because we're, and I didn't hear that. I was very proud about that. I'm pleased in my politics. I'm pleased in my business practice. I'm very pleased in my community. Tell me why what you want to do is better, not why what someone else wants to do is inferior. And so for the 88 people who spoke during our 3 nights of hearing, thank you. I think, you know, I had a conversation today. Someone had an unfortunate typo in an email to me, and responding to me as Mr. Grubb, or responded to me as Mr. Grum. And I wrote back and said, And she profusely apologized. I fully believe that she did, because the level of discourse among board members, among the community, has been, we can disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable. I greatly appreciate that. Selling property. I'm not a huge fan of selling property. I think everybody on this board has heard me say this at least time and time again. And then I can run through the litany of litigation that this district has been involved in for the acquisition of property. Whether it's the Morrissey tract, where we were sued because we condemned the property. Whether it was the Melsky property, where we purchased it across 2 properties, and shortly thereafter, there was a change in state law that no longer made state school districts basically exempt from zoning, and that tied that property up for years. Whether it was the house tract. So acquiring property, particularly in a community with as much development, is not something we can do easily. So with the exception of Twining Ford, I do want to address one thing. Someone came forward in a public comment. I think I want to say it publicly. Someone came forward with a comment, at a public comment, and said, I don't want to say they said they understood, they were suspicious that the district had received a proposal from Twining Village to buy the Rolling Hills School. To the best of my knowledge, we have never received such an inquiry. Most statements like that come from some point in fact. We have received at some point in the past 3 to 7 years an inquiry from the Richboro Care Center, which adjoins the Twining Ford property, about if we were to have that property available, the Richboro Care Center might be interested. And so I want to dispel the notion that we have some dark backroom deal going around Rolling Hills and Twining Village, and chalk that up, not unlike the Mr. Grump comment, which was a typo. It was just someone who had heard a rumor whispered down the line, and it really was the Richboro Care Center asking about the Twining Ford property. We have heard over the many nights that people have come to us and said, my child will go to 4 different schools in 4 years. The way our school district is arranged, children go to 3 different schools in 4 years by default. 6th grade in elementary, 7th and 8th, you're in another one, in middle school, and then high school. So I hear it, and I'm not belittling it, but when you say 4, it's not 4 versus 1 or 4 versus 2. We already have children who are going to be going to 3 schools in 4 years. I looked at the demographer's plans, the conceptual plans, and I think they may have done a disservice to the community. And I think they were unintentionally inflammatory. I think they may have shown some movements. I don't think they were as refined as they ultimately would. You know, when you take a bucket of water out of a bathtub, the water that moves there first is the closest water. The water that's further away doesn't move. I don't know that it was quite as matched and even as a fully robust. I recognize, and I'm not selling anybody down the river, I think it was a conceptual plan. Certainly, we weren't paying for the final full-on effort. I do believe that the redistricting committee, which has been spoken of as having members from all of the schools, will pay closer attention, will worry more about the intimate details of the thing, and children should move closer to a school that is closer to them. Wendy and Mike echo a theme that I have. Once a student hits the high school, that's their high school. If you made junior varsity, I'm not a big sports guy. If you made junior varsity sometime and you expect to be varsity, to jump to the other school it's a hard thing to do. Our children at that level have enough difficulty. Changing where Richboro goes doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I'm not a subscriber to sending that off to, I guess it was to North. Truthfully, the north-south balance, it's not the highest thing on my list. It's a nice to have, but as you play the the lifeboat game. You look at what can you put aside and keep going with. The north-south balance, 50-50, to me, that's a bit of a lifeboat exercise. I'm willing to not have it because the population itself will change over time. And if I constantly try and hit that balance, I'm never going to hit that balance. That's just my perspective. The environmental issues, I too am comfortable that what we're doing is appropriate. Having lived in New Jersey and faced some of the environmental challenges there, having worked for a large corporation and looking at some of those, I agree. To the point that says we should have done the redistricting first and then do the closing of schools. I don't know that I disagree with that. What I look at and hope is that as we come to consensus, and again, to echo what Mr. Block has said, we're not making the decision now. There are laws around how we make these decisions. But my expectation is that when we come to consensus, that's pressure tested. That's what the whole redistricting is going to pressure test that. My expectation is, in industry, you do something called user acceptance testing, which is you get to the end, you turn it over to the user, and they look at it, they work it out. And sometimes you get a little feedback that says, this isn't how I expected it to go. And oftentimes you hope you can just refine it on the margins. Occasionally you get it where you have to go back and re-engineer. I'm praying that we are not going back to re-engineer, but I think that the redistricting is the pressure test. It's how we confirm that what we talk about works. So those are some of my thoughts. There was a person I am cautious about this. I had a person who wrote, and they equated putting a child on a school bus with child abuse. I will tell you, as a fan of hyperbole, that is one that just strikes me as offensive. I have, unfortunately, as a emergency responder, been involved to see and deal with child abuse. A child on a school bus in no way rises to that. So I apologize. I probably shouldn't have referred to it, but I just found that hyperbole a little beyond. Now, having looked at, sorry for making you all listen, but I didn't say I'd be quiet. I decided to wait. I knew it was coming. I have struggles with status quo. I honestly thought if you had spoken to many people many months ago, I wanted to put this aside, go to status quo, and then redistrict. Just move on, straight on to redistricting. Let's figure out how it fits. But as I work more and more with this, and I look more and more with this, the notion that Wrightstown needs a school because it's the center of our community, that doesn't work for me. Someone quoted me correctly that I promised them an education, I didn't promise them a school. But at the same time, I look at the problem that is up that way, which is the differential from Salt Finestone, the collection area for Salt Finestone, and then you look at the collection area for Wrightstown. There's nothing else in that collection. There's nothing else where those children could get to that is not going to be a real long haul. It's just far away. When I look at Rolling Hills, and I had asked for it, we weren't able to get it together in time today. I really wanted to have a map with some diameters to help illustrate just how close, what that concentration of schools is in Northampton Township. They're between Hillcrest, Richboro, even Holland. There's a pretty dense concentration of schools there to allow children to move between. And so when it comes to, at this point, and I hope you hear this in me, which is I'm not married to it, but at this point, based on what I know and what I've seen and what I've heard and what I can understand and work through, I think I am of the camp which talks about increasing Wrightstown Elementary, and I applaud Mrs. Thomas in the conversation I had with her. This is why you speak to other board members. The notion about the people said, well, we could live without a gym. We've lived without a gym for a while. We could live without a gym. First, I thought the man had promised us $4.1 million to build the gym, and I found out he just said he could live without it. That was good. And then he turned to the community and said, what do you think? These were the people who were most concerned, and their effort is to sacrifice and to say, if it meant doing it, we'll go without a gym. Well, that's $4.1 million to sacrifice. I can understand that. And so at this point, as we sit here tonight, 4 days before we have to come to this again, I'm probably looking at adding to Wrightstown, adding to Richboro, and finding alternative uses for Rolling Hills. I do want to get out of Twining Ford. I do want to get rid of those buildings. And I know, continuing from our conversation before, there are community groups who are vitally interested in programs for people who have been our students and move on and still need an educational facility of some sort. And I'm hopeful that we're able to enter into some sort of agreement, lease or lease purchase or something, which preserves the fields at the building and leaves us right to reclaim the building should we need it. That's me.
Are there any other comments that any board members would care to make?
Could I?
Sure.
So I think one of the struggles we faced with Richboro Middle School when we started talking about repurposing Richboro Middle School, we realized that there were going to be all of these costs associated with it. So, we stop using Rolling Hills as a school, but we're still going to need a roof. We're still going to need to maintain that building. And so I think one of the difficulties I had with this color-coded scheme that compared the costs of these different scenarios was it kind of downplayed the reality that we've come to see through the Richboro Middle School discussion. And now, Mr. Grubb's talking about, and I agree with him, I don't want to get rid of properties. It's so hard to get them back. But if you're going to keep those properties, you don't really have the cost avoidance. You've got to maintain those buildings. And then just to go back to my belief that we really need to resource these redistricting models up front more. I think if you say, okay, we're gonna close, Rolling Hills, we get a redistrict committee, they dig in, they use test it, there's an acceptance, and people realize, oh, this doesn't actually work. Well, this isn't a sort of Damocles over your head. It's like run through your guts and twist it around before you said, never mind. This, there's too many cascading effects. So, why go there when we can just do some upfront work, have some work sessions, pay the demographer repeatedly, like, hey, come, could you come 3 times a week for, let's look at this, figure out what the implications really are, instead of being surprised at the end after a very slow, protracted process. So I just want everyone to keep in mind this cost avoidance idea has been proven to be pretty murky, and so I don't know that we can trust these comparisons in economics. And measure twice, 3 times, cut once, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I mean, I think there's some work that we should be doing first.
Thank you, Dr. Foster.
I've got a couple follow-up comments. So there's some mischaracterizations regarding the status quo that I just want to clear up. And then 1 or 2 other comments. So a comment was made that status quo is not making a hard decision, and also that it's heartless. So I take exception to those comments, and just, Bill, you had a very good point about cost avoidance. If we close Rolling Hills and we move our support staff and our backhoes and our lawnmowers, and Doug's going to come to us with a bill for that, and it's going to be substantial, and it's not going to be $2 million. It's going to be significant, right? Because we're going to have to, we know it needs a roof. We're going to have to put that roof on, so that should be included in here. And Doug's got a very thick manual in front of him that lists all of the repairs that he's going to want. We closed, or in the process of closing Richboro Middle School to save $23 million in renovations that are needed, and $1.6, I think, million in operating costs. And then we promptly got a proposal by the administration to spend $22 million to move the administration and 2 programs into that building. So that goes back to the idea of saving money and then spending a whole lot of money on top of it. The and status quo, just back to that for a second, again, all of these decisions are hard, folks. Listening to every parent that came up to the mic, often listen to the other board members and putting all that information together, these are hard decisions. And I don't think characterizing any other board member's direction as a not making a hard decision is fair. And certainly heartless is not a fair comment. And it is certainly not doing anything. We received new information today that takes the cost of status quo from 29 to 32.1 million to $3 million for a limited period of time. That's a big difference. That's a big, big difference in expenditures, and something that has been effectively challenged to make us all at least look at. I don't think there's one person on this board that I've talked to that says, I absolutely, absolutely agree in the demographer's report, and I trust it 100%. Not that the work was bad, just that there may be other information that we're not seeing and that wasn't taken into account. Jerry, the pressure testing was a very important point for me. So if I'm hearing your statement right, I think what you said was, well, we can start going down this road where we're building 5 classrooms on the Wrightstown and 10 classrooms onto onto Richboro Elementary. And if we start going through the redistricting process, we can change. We can change if we need to. Well, that sounds great, but here's my experience of this board. I sat through Newtown Middle School discussion where I was told over and over again, this is just preliminary. Don't worry about this. This is just preliminary. We only have to do soil samples. We only have to do a topography study. We only have to do this. And time again, I said, the train is leaving the station, and this money, this $55 million, is already spent. And sure enough, when it came to a point where there were some questions, wait a minute, we can't stop now. We've done all this work, and this is going to delay this many years, and this is the added cost it's going to be. And that is going to be the response, I guarantee it. If we get anywhere past, I don't know what the date would be, I'm assuming it's probably July, August, we're going to be told that delaying this at all and pulling back at all is going to cost us X number of dollars, X number of millions of dollars over the projected cost, because that means that we're missing an entire summer, and we're not, we have inflated construction costs, and my gosh, now we have higher interest rates, and my gosh, now we can't stop now. So if this is the wrong answer, we can't stop now. So there's nothing wrong with pausing using the school buildings that we need now, or we have now. They're my thoughts from the comments made.
I have a comment.
Yeah, please.
I have a few comments. First of all, I think we should have a board road trip. And I think the next time there's a really bad rain, we should take a trip to Rolling Hills. Because we could probably walk down the hall and see all the buckets that are capturing the rainwater that's leaking. So it's a disgrace that that school is like that, and I think that school should get a roof, even for next year's students, if we could. That building will need a roof. So to characterize that into the calculation of what it will cost to maintain these school buildings, if we continue with the status quo, I believe is disingenuous. I think the apples to apples comparison is the 500 or so thousand for Rolling Hills and 400 or so thousand for Wrightstown, which means that the cost would be far less than $3 million. It's really like $1 million, because that roof is coming regardless. What I think is interesting is that when we started this process, the only reason we were even thinking we could close schools was because we had 22 available classrooms, and then it became 20, and it's been dwindling down. The scenario that closes Rolling Hills and puts an addition onto Richboro and Wrightstown leaves us 5 available classrooms total in the district, 0 in the north. If our conversation at the beginning of capital planning was, if Dr. Frazier had said, we have 5 available classrooms in this district, we would have looked at each other and said, okay, well, I guess we're just going to go on to redistricting, because if we only had 5 available classrooms in a district that size with that large an elementary footprint, we would not see our way as that being acceptable. We wouldn't reduce from that. So it's just sort of mind-boggling to me that the demographer's report, which to your point, Mr. Bialik said that, you know, nobody 100% agrees. 2 independent reports say our enrollment is declining. The part that I didn't agree with had to do with the conceptual redistricting and how that modeled. In a district that is declining, and the projections for next year already show us down, I didn't listen to the meeting yet, but I believe you told me 94 students down at the elementary level next year, supporting these trends. It's just mind-boggling to me to spend all that money to put ourselves in a position where we are so limited in flexibility. It basically means that you are completely ignoring the enrollment data, completely ignoring the fact that we have passionately, many of us on this board, talked about the flexibility of popping sections if we need it. And you're taking that away. It's hard for me to reconcile that. I think that status quo, knowing that it could lead to a path that could allow us to close schools without spending this money and building an appropriate building at House in the long term is the better future.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Any other comments from the board? So it's clear based on what I'm hearing that there won't be consensus this evening. We'll continue this conversation next week, or not next week, on Thursday. It sounds like we've got 3 folks who are currently at status quo, 3 at closing Wrightstown today, and 3 that are either undecided or absent. I would expect that there will be a lot of looks at the information that we've heard this evening. For me personally,
Can you restate that, Andy? What did you hear?
Yeah, I'm not getting the same stuff.
I'm understanding there's 3 folks that are interested in status quo. That status quo could look like different.
Okay.
I'm understanding there's 3 undecided or absent, which would mean Ms. McKessie, Mike, and Wendy, and then 3 where they are today, right?
For closing, you said Wrightstown.
I'm sorry, closing Rolling Hills.
Okay.
I didn't get you.
I missed where
I didn't have you
everybody
in that
was.
camp. I had you as uncommitted.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got kind of a balanced group here. For me, I appreciate the sharing from the board. I thought it was great perspective. I really appreciate the strong points that were made across the board. And I appreciate some of the work that Mr. Bialik has done around status quo. Clearly something to look at. You know, for me, things I struggle with around status quo or that it maintains a K-4 in Wrightstown. And that's really, you know, something that I struggle with. It doesn't deliver operating savings. It doesn't provide closure to the communities per se. It could drive up OpEx and debt service over time. As Bill and Mark said, you know, the opportunity to evaluate is you know, preferable. It makes sense as they frame it up. What I like about our master capital planning process is that we've got a long-term plan that we've reviewed annually, that we continue to adjust as the facts change. One thing that was interesting to me, as I talked to folks who worked on the master capital planning committees of 4 years ago, were like, wow, I would have never made that, you know, that recommendation if I sat where I did today. So for me, status quo kind of feels conservative, safe, easy. It's not an easy decision, so don't put me in that camp. But it's you know, you look at it. I like the fact that you don't have to close any schools because that's not something anybody wants to do. But the other part about reviewing our plan our action plan, or our plan annually, is that we can do the thing as we start to take action. Mr. Grupp raised the pressure test. Mr. Bialik, I reacted to that too in a slightly different way. I can appreciate your comments you made consistently over time about the middle schools. And frankly, we just agree to disagree on that one. I stand firmly behind what we've done with the middle school plan. And I looked at that as us continuing to make decisions as they came, and I'm glad that we did those things. So for me, I'm gonna look to understand some of the points that folks have made today, and look forward to having continued debate on Thursday at our board meeting. We've got a relatively light agenda with the majority of the group present. We'll have our solicitor there if we are able to get to consensus to help us craft a motion. And unless there's any other comments, yeah.
So I was asked, I won't be here Thursday night. And that's unfortunate. And it's a business trip that's been scheduled for months and I can't make the change. And I was asked, does it bother me that I won't be here for this discussion? And then I said, no, I'm going to let my thoughts be known. But considering that this is so tight and considering some of the questions about the information, I'm just going to ask if we can delay that discussion to another board meeting, have a special board meeting, something like that. And I'm just making the request. So I'll put that request out there. And I'm also going to make a request to the community. So you heard several board members tonight who said, I don't like status quo because of the effect on the community. And it's not fair to the community. And one board member even said it was heartless. So I've heard the exact opposite from the community. So you have been very, very good about contacting us via email. And I will just ask you, if you feel differently, or if you agree, let us know. If status quo, and I would not support spending the $29 to $30 million or $32 million in status quo, but if that's something that your community and you can accept, let us know, because there are board members that sit on this board that think that it's unfair, and it's something hanging over the head of the community. So they're my two requests.
Thank you. All right, any other comments for the board? Okay, we'll continue to
Just to be aware, for Thursday, my intention is to be here. My flight arrives sometime in the 6 o'clock hour, so I may not be the first to arrive.
Okay, great. Well, that being said, capitalplanning@crsd.org for questions and updated FAQ. We'll continue deliberation next Thursday. This committee is concluded for this evening. Thank you, everybody.
We should move that. Absolutely, no question. We should move that.